Here I've got the UBXa from Behringer. It's their emulation of the absolute classic Oberheim OBXa from 1980. And it's been years in the making, but it's finally arrived. And in this video, I'm gonna sidestep the fact that it's an emulation of a vintage synth and look at it as a synth in its own right. In other words, what are you getting for your money? A comparison with my Oberheim OBXa will look into the similarities between the two coming soon, and although that's not a vintage unit either, it's considered to be as close as you'll get. So let's put that to one side for the time being and just take a look at what we have in front of us here. And I think I have to start off by giving a round of applause to all the folks at Behringer that have pulled this off, because I bought this for £899 back in December 2023. £899 for a 16-voice polysynth. That's absolutely staggering. It's a little bit more expensive now. It's about between £1,000 and £1,100 thereabouts. But even at those prices, it's incredible. I have to say I'm gobsmacked. And when you pull this out of the box, it really does feel like a grown-up synth. It feels like Behringer's first grown-up polysynth. And that's not to diss the DeepMind in any way. It just didn't have a certain vibe for me, and I don't know what that is. I know that's really subjective. Maybe it's because this does look like a vintage synth, and I don't mean any vintage synth in particular, because it does look like the UBXa. Just the fact that the knobs are nicely well spaced, it hasn't got a big flashy screen, the buttons are sort of vintage style buttons. The knobs themselves are a little bit wobbly. You can see they've got plastic shafts, and they feel a little bit more wobbly than something like the Pro 800 or any of the Eurorack versions of their synths. And I think that's just because the knobs are bigger, maybe, and you've got more space between them, but it's absolutely nothing that I'd be worried about. Plenty of other synths have got plastic knobs. The really expensive ones like the OBXa have metal knobs or metal shafts, but that is 4 times the price. And 16 voices. Not many analog synths can do that. So yeah, it has a certain je ne sais quoi about it. And don't ask me what I mean by that. It's a purely subjective thing. But I do think Behringer have delivered. And in one word, I'd say I'm flabbergasted. It feels really weighty. It's a metal construction with wooden end. It's obviously wearing the OB pinstripe suit. It's got nice on metal printing. There's no overlays here. And as I said, the buttons and everything just feel nice. This entry encoder is a twist and push type. So I don't want to lose my place there. Let's just take shift off. Where was I? So shift and page bank to go to bank A and press to select the sound. And this could have done with having discrete values, I think. One of those ones that sort of clicks, because every now and then, while as I press it, I slip and select something I wasn't choosing. But it's not a biggie. As you probably already know, the keyboard's got poly aftertouch, so you can do stuff like that. I might just save that one actually, just write that into 108, saved. Yeah, it's quite nice. Keyboard itself's pretty decent actually. As a player like that, you get a sort of almost a solid knock-in. So you can play it simply as a normal keyboard, and then there's a few millimeter extra play in the white keys at least. And you can sort of feel it clicking a little bit. So it's not super smooth, And the black keys don't have that little click, but the white keys do. But absolutely nothing to complain about. It's a very playable keyboard. And again, I'll go back to the fact that this is £1,000. Yeah, it's nice. So the keyboard's nice, it looks nice, the interface is pretty good as well. The way they've laid it out and the way it works, there's not too much menu diving unless you're going into some of the more sort of fiddly parameters, I'd say. Things like the atrophy, which I'll look at in a little bit in a minute. The worst bit about the whole thing is actually the screen, and I've seen a few people mentioning this on the forums, and it's a really odd thing because it's got a backlit LED in there, and as you move back, you just can't see it. It works much better if it's in maybe what you'd call a natural piano playing position, because you're a bit more above it. But if you're if it's slightly raised, like it is here or on one of my racks in the studio, it's just really difficult to see. It's not so bad when you're directly in front of it, you can see it, but it's not directly in front of you. So you find you do this quite a lot, which does get a bit annoying. It's a bit of sort of overlooking the screen, but it's just a bit of a shame that this whole section wasn't moved to there and this section moved to there, and it'd be problem solved. It wouldn't cost any more, but it's weird that nobody noticed that when it was in development, to be honest, because when it's in development and you go into your beta testers, you would think that they'd be playing with everything, but maybe they had a different screen on at the time, don't know. And maybe it's just because I'm spending more time with the screen at the minute because I'm doing a review, I'm going into every little detail of it, and I'm spending a lot of time looking at some of the finer points that maybe in general use you wouldn't be using. But just a little bit frustrating that it was an easy fix. But having said that, the overall impression is a massive thumbs up. It's a really impressive little unit. On the back, we've got MIDI in, out and through, and USB MIDI. There's also a left, a right, and a mono output. And there's a few inputs for foot pedals. We've got foot pedal inputs for vibrato and filter, and switches for sustain, program, advance, and for hold. You'll also notice that on the back, there's a fan. The fan's not on at the minute. It has got some settings in the global settings where you can put the fan on temperature control, on or off. And I don't know why it's in there. Maybe it needs it, maybe it doesn't. I remember the DeepMind, the fan was in there as a legacy of one of the prototypes. I thought we might as well leave it in, but it didn't actually need it. It's never came on since I've had it, but I am in Liverpool in the UK, and it's January/February now. It's February today. So maybe that's it. Maybe I need to turn my heating up to see if it'll actually start to kick the fan in, but it's not been any issue whatsoever yet, at least. But the DeepMind never was, so I wouldn't suspect it would for any reason. Before I go into anything, let's just take a look at how the interface works. It's really quite simple. Up and down the presets, we've got a shift key here, and that'll take you to bank A, B, C, and D. We've got 4 banks with 128 presets in each. To get an initial preset, shift and initial. Okay. As I showed earlier, this is a twist and press encoder. Initial patch. Move it from cancel to okay. And there we got the initial patch. Let's put it onto a sawtooth, make it a bit brighter. And the way the envelope and the filter works on this is like the original. We've got to turn the modulation up and then the sustain up to open the filter completely. If you turn the modulation down, you turn the filter frequency down. And what I wanted to show here was that we've got these different sort of light grey parameters, and they're like secondary parameters. So there's not a lot of actual menu diving, it's all here. If I hit shift, we're now in secondary function mode, and anything with a secondary function has a sort of half lit LED. You can see these are off maybe, and these are on. All these are on here. Take it off again, we're now back into the standard mode. Shift mode, secondary functions. Not sure if the camera's picking that up. But let's do something like put an LFO on the frequency of oscillator 1. Go to shift mode, and now we're on quantize 1. If we press this, it'll now quantize that LFO. So it's quantized that to semitones. If we look over here, we've got delay and we've got attack. So let's turn the delay up. So it waits before it brings in the LFO. Then the attack, so it'll have a gradual attack. So it's not quite as simple as it might look at first. There's lots of little things in here to have a play with. So shift mode again, we can see down here, we've got shift mode on these buttons on the menus. So if we press shift and voice, for example, voice inhibit, that'll turn off the various voices. In fact, if we go back in and press that, we can see we can toggle 9 to 16 off or 1 to 8 off. So we'll hit it again and turn voice 1 off or on. So let's turn it off. Don't know if this is showing up on the camera at all. Go to voice 2, turn that off. Voice 3, turn that off. So you can reduce the number of voices in there. You can take it down to mono if you want. It'd be quite nice if they had some presets in there, say mono or 8 voice only or 4 voice only or 6 voice only, because it does take a bit of time, but you can use the Synth Tribe app for that. This is the Synth Tribe app. There's portamento, MPE, settings, various bits and bobs, all from the global menu, and there we've got the voices on or off. So let's just, in this, turn off. Let's turn off all but 4 of the voices. So now it's in 4 voice mode. Let's put a bit of release on there. So stuff like that might be easier to do on the app, especially because you've got to sort of lean over to look at the screen to do it. But let's put them all back on again. Now to go back a level, we will press shift and voice mode again. So I'm back on the options, voice inhibit, and then we've got the atrophy settings. Atrophy we'll look into in a second. What else have we got in there? Stereo panning, so you can pan each of the voices separately. So if we go into that, press OK, we can see, well, I don't know if you can see on this, the different voices, hit it, and then we can go left or right. As I say, I've got this set up so I can see it from here. I don't know what the camera's seeing. Voice 2, 3, and 4. So yeah, you can just pan each of the voices separately. But I think that's linked to the different atrophy settings. Maybe then, let's take a look at the atrophy because I keep on talking about it. Now, this is something that's been mentioned an awful lot in forums because it's a really interesting thing. It's a really unique aspect to this. If we go into shift and vintage, we've got 8 different profiles. These are different ways of making it sound old and knackered. So like a vintage knob, but with lots more control. So we've got from really subtle changes to quite dramatic ones. So you can hear there the tuning's changing, the filter is drifting and stuff like that. But we're not limited to those 8 because if we go into shift and voice, atrophy settings, we've got 40 different settings in here, which is basically looking at every aspect of the synth and just maybe putting limits on it, maybe changing the central frequency, maybe adding some drift to it. So things like, for example, I won't go into it in too much detail, but filter drift speed. So that's obviously changing the amount of drift. The filter initial frequency will change. The FVPO drift, and that's the drift between the different oscillators. FVPO error, that's the error between the different oscillators. To be able to edit the atrophy settings, you need to go into shift and global, miscellaneous, okay, atrophy lock, and turn that to advanced. Otherwise, you can't edit them. So now shift and atrophy settings, okay, filter frequency, now we can edit it. If we go to profile 3, this is doing it. And if I add another voice, the different voices have got different filter frequencies drifting in different ways. So if I try and find a note where we can see it on the frequency analysis. There we go. Add another one. There you go, you can see there that there's two different peaks just wandering around next to each other. If we go in and make that a little bit more dramatic, then let's select that. So let's go into the Atrophy settings. Okay, so let's add a little bit more resonance. So the cap on the resonance, let's go to resonance of the 2-pole, increase the cap, it gets more resonance. Oh, we're on 4-pole, that won't help. There we go. Got a lot more resonance there. Sounding broken, isn't it? And you can definitely see there's two wandering round. You can see those up there that are around between 5 and 6K. Let's make that a bit faster, shall we? Let's go to the drift. Let's turn that drift up a bit more. There we go. There's two of them shifted round. In fact, let's make it mental. Let's change the drift speed. So hopefully you're getting an idea of what you can do with this. And there's the filter envelope drift. Now this is nice. I'll play something that I've done in a second with that, because you can make it so the envelopes all have different timings. In fact, maybe let's do that now. So we've got different timings on the envelopes. Like I said, I've been playing around a lot with this, as I think lots of people have, because it is really interesting. Let's see if I saved the one I'm thinking. So let's come out of the Atrophy settings, shift and voice come out. So here we've got just a really simple sweep. Let's go into the Atrophy. So go into shift and voice, Atrophy settings. Let's turn that resonance up just to make things a little bit more obvious. And let's put unison on. So we've got 16 voices playing now. Bit mental, we don't need that many on. So let's turn most of them off. So now we should have just 4 voices playing. Sounds better. Let's go back into the Atrophy settings and then let's put some error in there. Now we can hear, as I turn that up, we've got different filter frequencies per voice. Let's go to filter envelope drift, turn that up. So now each of them will drift in a separate way according to the envelopes. I think, but you can definitely hear that there's 4 voices there, all acting in slightly different ways. Four distinct resonances in there. So if we turn that down a bit and make it more of a standard type of sound, you're just thickening up the tone without relying on oscillator detune and stuff. It's just why older synths may sound richer and fuller. So there you go. There's HP without going into every single one of the 40 parameters. Hopefully, I've given a good overview of what it does there. Obviously, you can change things like the oscillator pitch. You can drift the oscillator pitch. You can drift the pulse width, stuff like that. I think you can drift the LFOs and stuff. So you can make the whole thing wobbly and wonky. But what's really nice about it is that you can use it as an effect like I've just been doing there. But the problem with doing that is that you tend to use up those 8 profiles like I've just used up a couple there playing around. It'd be nice if that was all saved per patch, because I think it's almost like a victim, or it's going to be a victim of its own success, because it's so interesting, so fun to use, that you want to play with it and have lots of different profiles for lots of different tones. But I'm not complaining about it. I'm just sort of saying what would make it. It's so good. It would be good to have it even better, really. Yeah, really interesting. And while we're on the Atrophy, maybe just show you the panning modes as well. So this is on wide. If we go into the stereo panning, we go through each of the voices, we can see the panning on them. So that's wide. If I go into another vintage mode, so modern, and then I go into the voice modes again, stereo panning, it's changed. So the voice panning is linked to the Atrophy. Okay, let's take a look at what we've got here as a synth. It's quite a simple, basic, standard sort of synth, really. We've got 2 oscillators, a filter that can be 4-pole or 2-pole, a filter envelope, an amplitude envelope. We've got a single LFO on the top here and an additional LFO in the performance section. Got an arpeggiator. We've got a sequencer. This is an addition to from the Oberheims. This is extra, really. And then over here, we've got some balance controls and main volume and chord modes and that. So quite a simple synth on the face of it. But like I said earlier, we've got extra little bits and bobs here and there, especially this. If we press Shift and Mod, we go into the mod matrix and we've got 8 slots there. And in those slots, we've got plenty of different sources and destinations. So here's the different sources. Look in the manual for all this sorts of stuff. I'm not going to go through everything here, but you can just see that there's a fair amount. And to go through from each of the parameters, so the amount, the source and the destination, just press select. Let's come out of that, Shift and Mod. So Shift and whatever to go into the menu, select to go deeper into the menu, and then Shift and whatever to go back up the menu. Gets a little bit confusing every now and then, that. But it works, except for when you don't press Shift and whatever at the right time, when you end up recalling an assignable preset. But let's not worry about that. Okay, then we've got split mode and we've got double mode. So at the minute we're in double mode. There's 2 sounds playing. And that's what the balance knob does. If we go into split mode, so well, wonky. To change the split point, split, and to change it to up here. Change it again to here. And we've got 35 splits and 35 doubles in here. If we look down at the screen, we can see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then A, B, C, D to Z, or to Z. I've got nothing in them yet. Same with the splits. Okay, so let's select that. Let's take it out of split mode. Oh, and just one other thing. When you're in split mode, you can be either looking at the upper or the lower, same as in double. So you're looking at the different voices or the different tones, depending on which of those you've hit. So let's turn them off anyway. So we're listening to a single tone. Just a really simple sawtooth, that one. We've got chord mode here. So play the chord, hit chord, turn it off again. Little thing with this is that if you sort of don't do it quite right, it's not on. It's not on. Why isn't there an LED there so that I can know if it's on or off? And also, so let's do that again. No. Or play it, hit it, there you go. Maybe I'll get used to it. But what you can't do is if I wanted to do a big chord, so like, I don't know, there to there to there, I'd have to use my nose because you can't reach it. It'd be nice if you could do like a hold. And the hold's not working out because hold only works in a similar way, so it'd be nice to be able to latch it so that you could do crazy chords without having to use your nose. Let's turn it off anyway. This auto button here is for calibration. If I hit it, we can see the calibration at the minute. If we hold it, it will calibrate. But we've got it calibrating in the background, so it should stay in tune. This control here, we've got portamento, and this is really nice actually because it's polyphonic portamento. Let's put one of those doubles on. This was nice, something like this. Oh, but yeah, really nice demonic sounding sounds there. Then we've got unison. You know what unison does? Voice detune, we'll press shift. The main operator mode of this knob is voice 2 detune. Bring voice 2 in. Okay, then over to the arpeggiator. Hit settings. We've got all the ARP settings in there. The ARP time, 16ths or 8ths, for example, and the gate time, sync modes, and the number of octaves. So quite simple, but really easy to use. Then we've got the LFO, and we'll look at the modulation in a second really. But the way this works is that you've got 2 modulation buses. So you set the depth for each of the modulation buses, and you can see the different destinations there. Oscillator 1 frequency, oscillator 2 frequency, pulse width of oscillator 1, pulse width of oscillator 2, filter frequency, and volume mod. So quite simple on the face of it, but as I say, you do have your modulation routines over here. Really simple. Oscillator 1 frequency. That's simple. So not a lot really to look at there, I think. Okay, then over to the oscillators. We've got 2 oscillators and noise. We turn the oscillators on and off with these buttons here, basically putting them into the filter. So there's no oscillators on now. Bring the noise in. Oscillator 1, oscillator 2. And you'll notice once you've turned them on and off, doesn't matter what setting you had them on before, they always go back to a pulse. So both on sawtooth, turn them off, turn them on again, they're back to a pulse. Maybe the original did that, but I find it slightly frustrating, to be honest. But anyway, let's turn oscillator 2 off and just listen to oscillator 1. Sawtooth, pulse. You can get that a little bit tighter, a little bit smaller with the different vintage settings, or go to the atrophy parameters themselves. One of them was much thinner. There you go, that one. Makes comparing it with anything else slightly difficult, doesn't it? But okay, and then we've got triangle. Turn them both off. Nice. That's nice. Great. So let's bring in oscillator 2. We can have it half level or full level. You can't change the levels of those. I don't think you can in the modulation section. I have looked and I don't think the oscillator volume is a destination, sorry. Detune oscillator 2. Make them both saws. And if they are both pulses, the pulse width of both of them is modulated or set by this knob here. So oscillator 2 on its own, and oscillator 1 on its own. And again, I don't think I have looked and I couldn't find a modulation destination that was oscillator 2 pulse width. So I don't think you can change them independently, again, like the original. But let's put it onto a sawtooth. We've got sync and we've got filter envelope control. So sync of oscillator 2 to oscillator 1. So we put sync on, Put oscillator 2 on, put it on a sawtooth. And then modulate that with the filter envelope. This modulation amount is the same modulation amount setting as for the oscillator as it is for the filter. Sounds great, doesn't it? Let's just have a listen to oscillator 2 on its own. You'll notice we don't have any FM settings in there. And these two frequency knobs are slightly different. For oscillator 2, it's semitones. And for oscillator 1, it's octaves. Which works just fine because you set your interval with oscillator 2 or your detune with oscillator 2. So, oops, let's put the filter envelope on it. And sing. I think that sounds lovely. Deeper. Try with a bit of unison. That works. Let's turn it down a bit. Put some unison detune on, hit shift. Yeah, I'd take a few of the voices out of that. Again, you can do it by the Synth Tribe app, or you can do it with the voice modes here, voice inhibit. Come back out of that. Over to the filter then. As I said at the start, the filter acts like the original did in that you've got to turn the modulation up to get the full range. And then you end up tweaking the modulation knob rather than the frequency knob. So turn the modulation down, turn the frequency all the way up. That's all we're getting. Let's hit the resonance up so we can hear the peak. So. And that's where that peak always stays. It doesn't go any higher than that. Put tracking on. And even if you go into the modulation settings, you can't make it any higher than that. That's the maximum frequency. Just to show you, go into shift, into mod, go into, in fact, if we go to modulation source, if we go to channel 18++, these are just basically sending a straight voltage through it. So let's put that to the filter. Filter frequency, okay. Let's turn it up. It's not moving it. If I turn that down, just to show it is working, but it will not send it any higher than about 15k. And I have actually looked at this versus my OBX8, and that does something similar. It's a little bit brighter, but I've tried in the vintage settings as well, in the Atrophy. There's only the filter initial frequency we can change. So even changing the initial frequency of the filter isn't sending it any higher than that. Put the tracking on. That resonant peak is still at that 15 kilohertz, but you can see that the sound's going higher than 15 kilohertz. It's just the filter center frequency. Won't go any higher than that. You'll also notice we've got a 4-pole mode. Let's take the tracking off. You lose a lot more volume with the 4-pole mode. Let's turn that down. So really are two distinct tones there. It'd be nice if that volume could somehow be leveled. Last thing is the envelopes, but there's not really a lot to look at with envelopes. Envelopes are envelopes, aren't they? It's got envelopes, it's got two of them. Are they snappy? Pretty snappy. Let's add some noise. There you go. So yeah, and quite long as well, so let's try a bit of this. So they're not the longest, but I imagine they're based on what the original did. But as a synth, as I say, sounds good, doesn't it? Let's turn that down again. Okay, we're getting there, nearly done all of it. I've not looked at the performance LFO yet. It's great to have this secondary LFO down here. First off, we've got the upper and lower buttons here. They will only come into effect if you're in double or split mode, for example. If we come out of that, it's just acting on the whole tone. So oscillator 1, modulation. Take it off. We've only got oscillator 1 on at the minute. Let's bring oscillator 2 in. Detune it. So oscillator 2 only. Both of them. Let's save that, and I'm going to save it for a reason. Let's just write that, okay. And that's because it's not saved per patch. If I go to another patch, we're keeping these settings. Which, depending on how you use it, might be useful, might be not. It'd be nice to have the option to have it saved per patch. So, bend them out to the bend. Now we're going. That's an octave or a tone, sorry. Octave or a tone. Or we can have oscillator 2 only. And transpose. The depth of this modulation is currently on 0, so you don't hear it unless you bring in the modulation. And obviously you've got to turn on the oscillators to be modulated. But if you wanted to just have it running all the time, which is why it'd be nice to have it saved per patch, because if you want to have two LFOs doing two different things on a patch, you've got to set them up separately every time you load that patch. But I guess the trick is not to do that. It's noise, sample and hold. Okay, then the last thing to look at is the sequencer. It's quite simple. It's polyphonic. If we press record, let's maybe, I don't know, just something simple. Let's turn that off. We can see on the display, we've recorded 8 steps. Play them. Its rate is dictated by the arpeggiator rate. Let's go into the settings and let's put the sequencer time on 16th notes, shall we? Okay. Play. Where are we? Come out of shift before we do that. Let's just clear that. So shift and clear the lot. And let's put some ties in. So record. And some rests. And a chord, baby. There we go. everything in one go. And to delete the last step, shift and clear last, start deleting them, and shift and hold that, and you just delete the whole lot. So, quite simple to use, rest tight, it's nothing complicated, but it's very useful, and it's saved per patch, but you can load them from other patches. To load it from another patch, you press the record button, and then you load it from whatever patch you are looking for. Is there anything in Jazzy Pad? No. Anyway, that's the sequencer. Nice it's there, nice and basic, but yeah, I think I've covered just about everything. So there you have it, the UBXa from Behringer. Overall, massively positive. I think it's an amazing synth, especially considering it's just £1,000 for a 16-voice VCO polysynth. That's insane. There are negatives, it's not wholly positive experience. Things like the screen, it would be much nicer if it was moved over to there, but in the grand scheme of things, they just fade into obscurity considering what we're getting here. I don't know if it sounds like an OB yet. I'm not stuck up against my Oberheim. I'll do that, as I say, in another video. If that's important to you, maybe wait and hang on and see that. But as I say, as you know, if it wasn't called the UBXa and it didn't have the pinstripes, it's just a great machine. So I hope you enjoyed that. And if you did, please think about subscribing, ring the bell, and join me over on Patreon. I've got patches, I've got samples, I've got exclusive tutorials and the like. Also, my Starsky Car YouTube channel, I've got patches, I've got samples, stuff you can buy. It does help to support the channel, although there are free things to download as well. But just pick up maybe 1 or 2 of the little sample packs. It does help me to do things like buy stuff like this and then sell it or keep it. I've not made my mind up yet. Anyway, thanks for watching, and thanks for staying to the very, very end, and I'll see you next time.